Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Curt 4-pole trailer wiring harness on a 2025 Jeep Wrangler. Now this is going to work across pretty much all the trims as well as the Gladiator. It's all going to be roughly about the same as far as getting it installed. The Gladiator gets a little bit different, but overall this is a fantastic complement to a Hitch if you already have one or if you're adding one on. Because even if you don't plan on pulling a trailer, having a hitch is nice. If you do have to pull one, you'll be able to put that ball mount in, but you need to make sure to be safe and legal by having 4-pole wiring. It's going to give you your lighting functions, which include running lights, turn signals, and brake lights. And all of this is done using OEM style connectors, so it really is plug and play when it comes to tapping into those signals. And it's going to be module protected as well as inline fuse protected. So with that being said, that just means that if you had a trailer with maybe some faulty wiring, you're never going to get a backfeed that goes in and damages your factory electronics. So you get peace of mind, and that plug and play really does make it simple. The hardest part of this installation is you do need 12-volt power, and that means running a wire from the back of the vehicle up to the battery. So you'll spend a little bit of time underneath your Jeep routing that wire, but other than that, you don't really need to be a wiring expert to get this installed. So if you decide after watching the video, maybe this is beyond your scope, or you don't have the tools, the place, or even the want to do this, I totally understand, but having 4-pole wiring on there is really a great addition. And so if the installation's stopping you from getting it done, you can take a look at our dealer locator to find someone close to you to get this installed, maybe your hitch at the same time. That way you can be on the road and still be able to tow that trailer. For you DIYers, stick around. I'm going to show you how to get this installed. You'll have your wiring installed on your Jeep in no time. And before we get into the installation, let's just take a look at our harness and what we're dealing with. So quite a bit of wires here, but really it's all going to have a place and none of it's too bad once we start laying it out. So starting at the module, this is going to keep everything protected. It's kind of the brains of the operation, and all of the wiring stems from it. So first we have a black wire. It's pre-stripped. This will eventually attach to the rest of the black wire included in the kit and run up to the battery with a fuse holder in place to get our 12-volt power. We have a brown and yellow, and this is going to be a factory style connection. So this will plug into the back of the taillight and just tee in between your factory connections. So it makes it super easy, really just plug and play at that point. Now with that, we also have this green wire, which is a little bit longer, similar style connection, and that's going to run over to the passenger side. That leaves us with our 4-pole wiring. Obviously, that's going to be our connection to our trailer, so that's going to live around where our hitch is going to be located. And then we have a ground wire, which we're going to just try to use a factory ground or a self-tapping screw to get that all grounded. So overall, none of it's terribly hard. It's just going to be a few simple steps. The hardest part of this whole installation is truly going to just be running this power wire up. So to get started, we're going to get our taillights taken out. And if you haven't done that on your Jeep, it's fairly easy to do. On your passenger side, have everything opened up. You're going to find a cover that's located right here. There's a slot where you can put a flathead screwdriver to pry it out. So we'll pop this, and that's going to give us access to a plastic nut. It's on a spring-loaded kind of stud that goes to the tail light. So a 10mm socket is going to loosen that up, and just kind of keep your hands on the tail light. It shouldn't drop out, but this is what holds it all in place. And if you twist that, you should feel it be loose from the taillight. And you can pull that out. You should know that your taillight's loose. Now we can go over here and get it pulled out. And as we pull this out, we're going to separate our harness. There's a locking tab, which is this red portion. Just pull that back. It'll clip. And then push down on that tab. These can be a little bit tricky at times. Sometimes what I've found is if you push in and then pull out, you can get that to release. If it's really giving you a fight, what you can do is put a flathead screwdriver in that slot as you push the tab, and that should allow that to get over this little notch. But with this taillight taken out, now we can head over to the driver's side where it's a little bit different, but similar concept to get that taillight out. The main difference is just going to be the plastic panels slightly different depending on your year, but being that this is a 25, it has this longer portion that's got, you know, your hose for your rear squirter and all that. So this pops out fairly easily as well. You can use flathead, just kind of pop that up, and you can normally get the rest by hand. We have that same plastic 10 millimeter nut that we're going to remove, and then we'll just undo our taillight just like we did on the passenger side. Now in the driver's side taillight pocket, you can look through there and probably see daylight, and that's where we're going to pass up our brown and yellow wired harness. That way we can make our connection. So pretty wide open here. If you just reach up with that harness and start to see that come through, you should be able to grab it. Another option would be you can use a pull wire method. You could pass something down here, tape up those wires, but it's pretty open here, so it makes it simple to be able to pull this up. And before we get anything else mounted, I like to get everything ran to make sure we have all the proper slack. So for now, what we'll do is grab our factory harness, we'll get this snapped into place and locked in, and then we can kind of leave this here now because I'd like to mount up the module inside of here to keep it protected, but we want to make sure that we have slack for the rest of it. So we'll grab our green wired harness as well as our 4-pull, and we're going to start running this over to the passenger side. We'll pull it up, and I'll show you kind of how I go through there because the pocket's a little bit different, but again, similar concept here. So the main thing is we're getting this routed to where we think we're going to have it mounted, this to the taillight pocket, and then we can figure out the slack on the other end. On the passenger side, we're going to use this opening, the circle, to pass up our wiring, and so make sure you use that. The reason being is because as you close this rear hatch, this can get in the way. We don't want to catch any of the wires in the process, so make sure you're using that hole. And then from here, I'll raise this up and I'll show you the path that I got this wire ran to. So when you're running your plugs through, you're going to use the gap that's in between the frame and the body, so it's kind of near the body mount, keeping it away from the muffler as best as possible. And so once I got to this rear beam where you may have a hitch attached, more than likely, I zip tied this up along the top. The holes go straight through, so if you attach a few zip ties or get some longer ones, you could run through, zip tie that up. And then routing our wire across, we fed it up over the frame rail near the body mount. There's a gap that's large enough to pass those plugs through, and just kind of keep everything tidy away from the muffler so it doesn't damage the wires. And I use zip ties. The holes in the bottom portion where your hitch mounts up should be a straight shot through, so if you have a few zip ties together or some extra long ones at home, you can zip tie that wire on the top of that beam. It's going to keep it away from the muffler. So I just continued that on, and then as I mentioned, that 4-pull, I also routed up to this point and zip tied it along as well. And ours has a bracket that eventually I'll mount up our 4-pull on, but if you don't have one, you can use the dust cap and just use your safety chain loop, attach that, and that's perfectly normal. So essentially I just kind of pulled the slack to where it's not too terribly tight, zip tied it up, and that left us with our module hanging down. We have our black power wire and our ground. So I want to connect these before I get my module mounted up, or especially the power wire. It's a lot easier to do when you have room to work rather than getting that module mounted. So at this point, we're going to grab a butt connector and that black spool of power wire so we can get that attached. To get the power wire attached, we're going to grab the spool of our new wire and we're going to strip this back, 1/4 inch give or take. It's already pre-stripped off of the module, so we can leave that there if you want. You can strip it back a little bit more, but not necessary. The kit comes with this yellow butt connector, and that is how you connect wires, but I think you're better off to use something different, and that's going to be a heat shrink butt connector. The reason being, it's going to connect it all the same, but once you take a heat gun to it, it'll shrink around, creating a nice watertight seal. And just being that this is kind of exposed to all the elements that your vehicle is driving in, it's a good chance that that water can get in there and break it down, and the heat shrink butt connector does a really good job of protecting it. You can get them here at eTrailer. You can generally find them at most hardware stores, but it is something that's going to prolong the life of your wiring, just a little bit better insurance, and it's a cheap, quick, easy thing to do. And we're gonna be using another one up in the engine bay as well, so you might wanna grab a pack of them. You can use these. I would maybe recommend, if you are gonna stick with these butt connectors, get some electrical tape and wrap it around it, create a nice seal as well. But we'll get this attached. We'll heat it up. And that way we can get that module mounted up. It'll be nice and easy, and this is already attached. We have plenty of ground wire. We can get the module in place, and the pocket that I'm gonna put it in for safekeeping is gonna be, well, kind of where we zip tied up our other wire, but that oval oblong shape allows us to put this in that spot, and it's gonna keep it a little bit more protected. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to have enough to pull this up into that taillight pocket like I originally wanted, but that's okay. So you can attach this in a few different ways. One of them is going to be an adhesive, just a double back-sided adhesive. We'll just put this on the bottom, and then in this area it may be dusty and dirty. You might want to clean that out, but we can slide this in and stick it on the bottom. Another option too is going to be this opening. You can self-tap this into the metal if you really wanted to. You could mount this right here and it's not going to cause any issue. You can also use the zip tie on here. So a bunch of options, but really what it boils down to is minimize the amount of movement that this module would have over its lifespan, just to make sure that it lasts as long as possible. It's a little tight, but we should be able to navigate this in there. And then once you find that flat surface, if you're using the double-sided adhesive, you can press that into place. If you're struggling to get it in the pocket, another option is you can use the double-sided adhesive, stick it on the back side here, and then you can run a zip tie through that hole and through the portion on that module. This is also going to be a nice secure location. So at this point, we're going to get our ground wire self-tapped into metal. I didn't find a factory ground that I can use right away, and then self-tapper does a pretty good job of getting this in place. So I'll grab that and we'll get this mounted up. We'll grab our self-tapper, and then we're just going to send it into the bottom here. And you don't need to get crazy. The main thing is the ring terminal doesn't spin around. If you go too tight on a self-tapper, it'll strip those threads out that you just made and make for a potentially loose ground. So at this point, we're going to grab our excess 4-pole and our ground wire, get this zip tied up. There's some factory wire loom that I can use, and then we'll start routing this up to the battery. So once I get that cleaned up, I'll get this routed and I'll show you exactly how to run it, and that way we can get this tied into the battery. Now the power wire, being that we're starting on the driver's side, we eventually need to make our way over to the passenger side where the battery is located. And you really can choose your own path here, but the path that I'm going to show you is going to be a safe way to do it, and it's relatively easy, especially with the ground clearance that you have on a Jeep. You can at least lay under here and kind of run that wire. So what I did is I went up and I did zip tie up our power wire. There's a wire loom kind of on the frame rail just to keep it from ever making contact with the exhaust. From here, I continued on. You can see it's right here, and at the top of our shock, there's a hole or where our spring mount is, and zip tied it there. This rear cross member I used to run the wire over, and that way we can get over to that passenger side. And then from here, I just zip tied up along the top of the fuel tank and just really find a gap to where you can pull it through before coming up to the front. And when you get to the front, our whole goal is to run this up through the firewall and then, along the firewall to the battery. So it's really up to you. Just kind of keep it along the frame. And if you get to a point where you can't feed that wire up, you can use a pull wire. Just feed something down that's a safe path, and you can tape up that wire and pull it. So again, it's really up to you, but I used factory wire loom along here and then tucked my wires behind some of the factory ones before pulling it up. And if you go kind of straight up, that'll put it up at a really nice spot where the battery is. So You can see mine here, but using this factory wire loom to kind of weave it in there will keep it away from the engine and keep it protected. So at this point, we'll head up and then we can connect to 12-volt power. And I routed my wires again pretty close to the firewall, so it puts us really close to our positive terminal. But if you route another way, main thing is the belts are located right here, the alternator's there, so just keep it away from any of that, obviously, so we don't damage our wires. So we'll get our positive connection made, and before I do anything with this wire, I like to get my fuse holder in place. It really is going to make it a lot cleaner looking, I think, overall. We can figure out exactly where we need to cut and splice. So what we'll do, we'll make sure the fuse is not in the fuse holder, and it's pre-stripped. I'm going to strip mine back just a little bit more, just to have a little bit more bite in the ring terminal. And then give it a twist. And then we'll take our ring terminal, crimp this down. And I always try to give it a quick tug just to make sure that it's a nice solid connection. And we can choose any of the studs that are located on the battery. I'm going to use this 10 mil that we have. So we'll loosen this up. Take our fuse holder and kind of run it along with that. It'll keep it nice and clean once that's back on. And then we'll tighten that nut back down. So that'll look good once it's all back in place. Now at this point, we need to make the connection to our power wire with our fuse holder. So a lot of times I'll zip tie it up to these wires that we have here so it's easily accessible if you ever have to gain access to it. But our power wire, we have quite a bit of excess. So I'm going to cut here, and it'll still leave us a little bit of slack, but leave yourself enough to where you can make that connection easy as well. Just cut this back. We'll strip it. And just as before, you can use the butt connector that's included, but being that this is in the engine bay, if you hose out your engine bay, or again, it's exposed to any weather, it's nice to have that heat shrink butt connector for added protection. With that shrunk down, we can put our fuse in our fuse holder and cap that up. I'm going to zip tie up our wires just to make it a little cleaner in the engine bay. And if you haven't put your taillights back in, now's a good time to do that. And that's really going to do it for the installation. But before you hit the road trying to tow a trailer or use your accessories, double check that the light functions are working properly. You want to make sure that as you hit those brakes and turn signals that it's actually working. So doing that before you hit the road is going to be key. So our 4-pole tester is going to simulate hooking up to a trailer. So I'll hop in, I'll run through the light signals and make sure that they're working properly. So when we run through the signals, make sure you check your running lights, left turn signal, right turn signal, and then also your brakes. And that was a look at installation of the Curt 4-pole trailer wiring harness on a 2025 Jeep Wrangler.